Glyphs. The primes you want to get are Life Bloom, Rejuve, and Swift Mend. The only other Resto one worth noting is Regrowth, but as it is such a weak hot in the first place, it's almost never worth it. Majors. The three major ones you definitely want to get are Rebirth, Wild Growth, and Healing Touch. Now the Healing Touch can be replaced with Innervate, but as of 4.2 the Innervate changes, it is not recommended. In 4.2, Innervate will change from 20% mana when casted on yourself to others to 5% mana when casted on anyone but yourself. This essentially means that you will keep all your Innervates for yourself. With the Glyph, you would get 10% of your mana back, and the person would still get 5%. Not worth it. Save it for yourself. The minor Glyphs are Dash, Unburden Rebirth, and Treant, and also possibly Mark of the Wild. I get Treant since it gives us our old tree form back. The new one is incredibly bulky, and I found it was hard to gauge placement with it. Dash is overlooked usually, but I use it during fights, and it never hurts to have it be a smaller cooldown. Unburden Rebirth is simply so I don't have to carry reagents. So now that all that nitty-gritty stuff is done with, you are ready and armed. Boss fight time. You will probably be raid healing, which means that your spells will be Wild Growth and Rejuve primarily. You are to keep the Life Bloom on the tank, but make sure you have 3 stacks on him, or it's almost useless. Refresh the stacks and timer by healing the tank with Regrowth, Nourish, or Healing Touch. In 4.2, I'm going to recommend using Regrowth for this, or by just casting another Life Bloom on them. If the tank is taking a lot of damage and healers are having trouble keeping him above 70%, I will sometimes let the Life Bloom fall off and have a large heal, and then put 3 stacks back on. Then, know who usually stacks with more than 3 people. My targets are usually melee, like a rogue, and put a Rejuve on them, and use Swift Mend, which gives efflorescence that heals people in the circle. Keep in mind, you should only do this when there is raid damage going out. Sometimes it takes a while at the beginning of fights for damage to start going out on other people. It is your responsibility as a good raid healer to understand at what point raid damage will start. Is there a flame breath that hits everyone when this timer is done, etc. And you can start putting hots on people, usually rejuvenations, right before the damage goes out. Use Wild Growth on every cooldown, but do not cast it preemptively, since it heals for more at the beginning of the spell and not at the end. You should also use Tree of Life Form as early as possible if it is a long fight, more than 4 minutes, so it will be up again before the fight is over. When in Tree of Life form, you should be using Life Blooms, which can now be cast on multiple targets, and Wild Growths. Whenever your Life Bloom procs a clear casting buff, you should use it with Regrowth on a tank or someone else that is low. You have 30 seconds in tree form, so don't panic and rush so much that you get ahead of yourself. If the raid is still low towards the end of your tree buff, which is the last 10 seconds or so, I would recommend popping Tranquility, which is a very powerful AoE healing spell. If tree form drops during your cast, it won't interrupt, but you will lose 15% healing on however long you have left. I typically pop Bark Skin when I use Trank. If they want you to watch the tanks more, it would be worth getting the decreased casting time talent. Keep Life Bloom on the tank and spam Nourish since it's cheap and will heal while keeping your Life Bloom up. But if the tanks are taking a lot of damage, then use Healing Touch. Once every minute or so, I would use Regrowth to get the Nature's Grace buff, which gives 15% haste. It has a 1-minute internal cooldown. You should also, of course, keep Rejuve on the tank and cast Wild Growth on cooldown. It can sometimes be hard to gauge how well you've been doing. Even though you might kill bosses, there's always room for improvement. For that, guilds use World of Logs. I will explain how to set up and use World of Logs in another video, but if you are in a guild that already logs raids, here are some things to look for when gauging your performance as a druid. Note, this is only how well you did healing, not your awareness like not standing in stuff and not dying to mechanics. Go to your guild's raid log for any given night, scroll to Full Report and then Kills, then choose the fight you want to look at. Then scroll to Dashboard and click Healing Done. You'll see the spread for all the healers. The active time is how long you were alive and healing. 99 to 100% is the full fight. Click on your name, go to Healing by Spell. This will tell you your top spells used. If you are doing it, quote, correctly, the top 2 will usually be Wild Growth and Rejuve, with Life Bloom and Efflorescence at the top as well. What you need to look at is the hot uptime. Wild Growth uptime should usually be between 50 and 60%. Rejuve should be fairly high, with 70 to 80%. But Life Bloom should definitely be above 90%. All the other uptimes are irrelevant. The uptimes can fluctuate depending on how conservative you are with mana and the fight, like is there regular raid damage or just peak times, as that will affect your uptimes. Some people look at overhealing done, but if mana isn't an issue, I don't stress over it. Also, if you go to buffs gained, you see that I used Tree of Life, Innervate, and Trank twice during the fight, since it was over 3 minutes long. Alright, so hopefully that gives you a better idea of how Resto Druids work. In another video I will be showing you how I keep track of all the hots and buffs we get, since it is quite a task.